one. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first part of our 5-part Lunch and Learn series with Virginia Blum. My name is Christine Lai, and I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Special Education Legal Fund. First, I'd like to thank our corporate sponsors. Their generous support makes this webinar program, as well as so much else of what we do, possible. I'd like to acknowledge Wellspire Advisors at the Platinum level and Winston Preparatory School at the Gold level. At the silver level, we are grateful for the support of Fusion Academy, Villa Maria School, Eagle Hill School, and Chapel Haven Schleifer Center, and American School for the Deaf. Finally, at the bronze level, we are grateful to the Shrub Oak International School, as well as the Pinnacle School and the Spire School. Thank you again to our 2023 class of corporate sponsors. We could not do what we do without your support. For those of you who aren't familiar with Special Education Legal Fund, I'd like to take a moment to introduce ourselves. Special Education Legal Fund, or SELF, was founded in 2018 to provide resources, knowledge, and support to families in need with children in the special education system. Since then, we've provided nearly $800,000 in grant support to over 175 families across 70 school districts in Connecticut and Westchester County, New York. Just a few words about our grants programs. We run 2 grants programs for families at SELF, the Legal Assistance Program and the Advocacy Support Program, both of which are currently accepting applications now. The Legal Assistance Program, new increase in grant support for this year, provides families in need with up to $6,000 in legal support from a qualified special education attorney. The Advocacy Support Program provides families in need with up to $1,000 in advocacy support from a qualified non-attorney advocate. For more information to begin the application process, you can visit our website below or check out this QR code, in which will bring you to the application screen where you can start the pre-screening process. Just a quick note that tomorrow, our September 20th webinar is a panel of special education attorneys, Andy Feinstein, Meredith Braxton, and Courtney Spencer, who will be discussing outplacement, all the ins and outs and strategies of the outplacement process and seeking the outplacement process from an attorney's perspective. So please join us 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Again, you can sign up the way you signed up for this webinar today, or you can click on this QR code to to bring yourself to the registration page. Sorry, there's a lot of commercials this month. The next thing I want to mention, and I think the last thing before we launch into the good stuff, is that Special Education Legal Fund is pleased to present our first ever resources fair on October 1st, which is a Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. at the Stanford JCC. We have a number of great participants, almost 50 vendors that are providing support to special education students and special needs families. And we are really, really pleased to be able to bring families and vendors together, exhibitors, to address everyone's very, very important needs. So please join us October 1st, 2023. I lied. This is not the last commercial. If you enjoy this Lunch and Learn webinar series, please join us on October 17th for the next segment, Eligibility Determination, which will follow on from today's presentation on the referral process. And finally, here we are. We are so pleased to have Virginia leading this discussion and and seminar on the referral process. Virginia is a amazing special education advocate who joined the special education advocacy firm of Connecticut Educational Advocacy after completing the COPA's well-regarded CET2 training course. And, Virginia is a board member of Special Education Legal Fund and a longtime friend of ours. And we are really, really excited to have her here today in this 5-part series about, all the things that you need to know and maybe don't in the special education process. Finally, because this wouldn't be a webinar without a disclaimer, this webinar panel is presented for informational purposes only. This is intended as a resource for families who are navigating the special education system in Connecticut and New York, and is not intended to provide legal support, advice, or assistance to any particular individual, nor is it intended to replace the advice and counsel of a qualified special education attorney. Families in need of legal support, advice, or assistance should contact a special education attorney licensed to practice in Connecticut or New York to discuss the specific needs of their individual student. This webinar should not be construed as an endorsement by Special Education Legal Fund or any of its representatives of any of the participating attorneys, advocates, or professionals in the panel, nor should it be construed as an endorsement of any school or school representative invited to appear today. And so here we are. Virginia, I'm going to turn it over to you for Lunch and Learn, the referral process.
Well, great. And I'm excited to be here today and to kind of walk you through what you do and how you can make a referral for special education. So the first part of this is kind of telling you all what it means to make a referral and what is a referral. So in the law under IDEA, the school district has an obligation to identify, locate, and evaluate students. I lost the.
I know, sorry, having a technical difficulty.
Okay.
Are we back? We're sort of back. All right, apologies.
That's all right. To identify and evaluate a child that is suspected or may have a disability that requires special education. And this is technically called child find. But what that means to you is if you think your child has a disability that affects their learning, you have the right to request an evaluation for special ed. And what the term that we call that is, you make a referral. It can be very simple. It's an email, typically needs to be in writing. Everything needs to be in writing, but it just lets the school team know that you're concerned about your child and that you feel like it's important to have your child assessed by the school team to determine if they have a disability that requires support. It's really the first step. And it's important to put that in writing. And if you feel like it's necessary, you just really say, I am making a referral for special education for my child. You send it to the vice principal, and that starts the process. Next slide.
Did that work?
No.
Okay. I got to try this again. Sorry. We're running into a small.
I can pull it up on my computer.
Small challenge.
Oh, here it is.
All right. There we go.
So who can make a referral? So the parent can make a referral, the school team can make a referral. A lot of times, if I'm working with a family, we have the pediatrician write a letter saying, I think that we need to be considering evaluations in my professional work with your child. Birth to 3. So if you're getting birth to 3 services, they can make a referral. So anyway, but absolutely a parent can do it. And, you should know that you can do it and that you have, and if you suspect it, you should be doing it. And you just make send an email and you send it to the vice principal. Next slide. Sorry, I'm having now a technical difficulty. I'm getting there. Okay. Does your child have to be a certain age to make a referral? So if the child is under the age of 3, you're reaching out to your birth to 3 service providers, and hopefully you're talking to your pediatrician and you're working through that process. If your child is at least 3 years old, until they have a high school diploma or the age of 22, they are eligible to receive special education services, and you make a referral to your local school district. So that's sort of the age we're looking for in terms of making a referral. Next slide. So I've sort of already kind of covered this. A big thing in this Lunch and Learn series is going to be, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So you can certainly call and ask to talk to somebody at school, but to make sure that they have received this and they're very clear on what is happening, your referrals should be in writing. You should send an email. If you call and have a phone conversation, you want to follow up with an email. This is a very simple, straightforward request. You list your child's name, what grade, where they are in school. You state that you're making a referral for special education, and you're requesting a meeting to discuss your referral. The district should acknowledge the receipt of the referral request. Some districts have a form that you can fill out, and they may ask you to write down some more details about your concerns. That's fine, but the email in and of itself starts the process. So from the date that you send the email with your request, the timeline is ticking in terms of the amount of time they have to consider, do the evaluations, and then present the findings at a later PPT.
And Virginia, can you clarify what that means in terms of the clock starting, the timeline starting, so parents understand that is what that means in terms of the school district and themselves?
So in the state of Connecticut, and there is a slide on this later, Christine.
Sorry.
That's okay. But you have, when you make a referral, that is day one of the process. So the process, by the state of Connecticut, has to be completed in 45 school days. So it is not from when I sit down for the first meeting, but it is when I make the referral. And there's a slide that I don't know what number it is, but it's down there. It'll show you kind of very clearly from the state of Connecticut's website on what that is. But the reason you want this in writing is because you want a record of the date you made the request for the referral. And that is a very important date for the timeline of this process. And I do want to say, sometimes if you call the district and they say, you say, I'm very concerned about my child, not paying attention, whatever it is, and I really feel like we need to be thinking about this process. A lot of times the districts may say, oh, he's great, I don't see any problems. And I don't think we need to do that. Again, it's not up to that conversation and that verbal conversation. It is a formal request and a formal meeting. So I encourage you all to put it in writing and make the request and have the discussion at PPT and follow the steps versus, kind of having that one-off conversation and then not putting it in writing, because then you didn't really make the referral. Hopefully that makes sense. What happens, next slide. What happens next if you make a referral? So you send that email. What should happen? The district should set up a PPT meeting. It's called a planning and placement meeting. And that is a formal meeting. It absolutely has to happen if you make a written request for a referral. You should receive a formal notice it's like an invitation that says, this is the date, this is the time, and who will be attending the meeting. And that's important to review and look at. If the district throws out a date that doesn't work for you, you don't have to take that date and time. The date and time should be mutually agreed upon, so it should work for both the school and the parents. I have a lot of districts that say we only meet on Tuesdays. Well, if you work and work part-time and Tuesdays is a day that you work, then that doesn't work for you. And they need to find another time in the week that does work for your schedule. It does have to be during school hours. So, maybe during your lunch or another time that's convenient, but you can't do it after school hours. This meeting is a requirement. It's not appropriate to refuse the request for a meeting. If you formally write and make the referral, they formally need to have this meeting. And in order for your procedural safeguards, which is your rights under the law and under IDEA, to be in effect, you absolutely have to have the meeting. So even if the district says, well, this is a waste of time, we're not going to qualify for, we don't think you need to be doing testing. That isn't what we need to do. You still want to have that meeting. You want them on the record saying that, and you want to be on the record saying you disagree with that. And that's the only way to do that, is to have this legal meeting and to understand your perspective, their perspective, and what happens next. So that PPT meeting is a critical part of this process. Next slide. So how can you prepare for this meeting? So now you've made the referral, you've scheduled your meeting. What should you be doing to get ready for that first meeting? You want to gather your information. You know, if your child brings home work samples or homework that they can't do, you want to have that at your fingertips. If you have a writing assignment that, you know, shows letters that are not formed right, that not complete sentences, you know, things that you're concerned about, any kind of standardized testing that the district has done. So usually September, sometime in the winter, and then in the spring, they do standardized testing. You know, if those testing scores are going down, that's a data point that's showing, you know, some struggles. It's not just academics that you can focus on. Also, emotional and social concerns are important. You know, if your child doesn't want to go to school, he can't access his education. If your child, you know, has no friends, that's relevant. You know, if there's other issues that kind of are bothering you, all of that goes into learning how to be a functional adult and learning how to be a good member of the society. And, you know, that's more than just, can they read, can they write, can they do math?
If they're calling you every day.
Right. That's a good point. If they're calling you, if you having to pick your kid up because they're not regulated and they need to leave, that's a data point. If you have any, you know, if you look at their report cards and the grades are not where they need to be. And again, you can have a very bright child that's earning a C that is capable of more than that. That's academic impact. That's impact, like, you know, and it can be because they're depressed or anxious and can't get their work done. Also, if you are working with anybody outside of the district, so if your child sees a therapist, if your child goes to occupational therapy, if you have a speech person on the side, anybody that's helping you with your child and sees a need can write a letter. This also includes your child's pediatrician, especially, you know, if your child, you know, if attention and sustaining attention is a struggle, the pediatrician will often write a letter that says, you know, in my opinion, this child is struggling with attention, and I think we need information and testing to understand the level of impairment. So, you know, again, that's part of your team around your child and a voice in this meeting. The other thing that I often recommend when I'm going into a meeting, because I think, you know, as a parent, this is your child, you're really invested in this, is that you should write down what your concerns are. It can be a simple bullet point, you know, list. It can be a formal letter. But why do you think your child needs this testing? What is leading you to that conclusion? And so that way you're prepared. And when you go to PPT1 and the school team says, well, you know, parents, you called this meeting, what's going on? You have your thoughts already pulled together on that, and you can articulate and comment on what you're concerned about and why you feel further investigation, you know, and a deeper dive needs to happen. I mean, remember, PPT1 is just determining whether or not we should complete evaluations. not, whether or not we need specialized instruction. So your goal when you're writing this letter and thinking about this is, look, I'm seeing all these things. I think we need more information. I think we need to take a deeper dive into what could be impacting my child's ability to access their education. Next slide. So this is now you've done your preparation, you've made your referral, and we're having PPT. It's called PPT 1. And at PPT 1, what do you do? So the first thing that I recommend is that this is a legal meeting, and you have the ability to record the meeting. A lot of people have phones that offer the ability to record. You can also pick up like a little tape recorder box at Staples or something to record. If you plan to record the meeting, you do need to tell the people in the meeting that you are recording, and you need to have your recording device ready. If you disclose that you are recording, the school district can also record. They generally won't record the meeting unless the parents are recording. The other thing that could happen is the school district will say it's fine to record, and if we request a copy of the recording, will you please provide it? And absolutely, you're being transparent. It's all fine. So either one works. But just because this can be overwhelming, or because, when you're following up after the meeting, you want to have a clear record of what actually happened and what you said and what they said. Recording is a way to have that and to go back and reference it. So I always tell my clients to record all the meetings that they have with the district that are PPTs.
Work if you're on like in a virtual meeting in Zoom or some other type of meeting as well. How the same standard applies?
So yes, you have to tell them. The school district will not, at this point, they were doing this a little bit different, but now in the vacuum of, or after COVID, and where we're proceeding, they will not record the video. So while we're recording this webinar and people can replay it, the district's not going to record it on the computer screen, but they will still allow you to use your phone and to record the meeting with the audio piece. Mm-hmm. And that's better than nothing. So again, you can't record it if you haven't told them, but as long as you start the meeting and say, I'm planning to record the meeting, then it is your right to record. The PPT team talks, this is at the meeting, after we've recorded and we've gone through and said who's here, then everybody around the table reviews information about the student. The parent is an integral part of the team. It's actually listed as a required member. You can't really have a PPT without the guardian, the parent, some advocate that's for the student, that's tied to the student, like the parent, the guardian. So you are presenting your information, and that's why you did all that prep work leading up to this meeting, so that you know what you want to say. The teachers also will give their opinion. So the regular ed teacher will talk about, where they are with the data points on the grades, the test scores, and how your child is performing in the class. Remember that grades are important and test scores are important, but these are only one data point. So, if they do okay in the testing, but they're off topic and not having the appropriate responses to the class discussion, or if they're out of the classroom because of their behavior and they miss the lesson, like all of that is their inability to access the education. And so that's all also important information. And then after we've sort of had that discussion, we determine what the next steps can be. What are we going to do? So there's really only two outcomes. The first would be that we recommend a full and individualized initial evaluation. And if they're recommending evaluations, we are discussing what that looks like. So, what areas are we evaluating in? What measures are we going to use? The school team can design it. You can ask tons of questions in that. so that you understand what areas they're looking at. So if you come in with a concern that your child has a social emotional piece going on, you don't want to limit the testing to just academic testing, because that won't tell you if there's an anxiety component or a social piece to that. If you're concerned about, their ability to express their language or to have communication, you want to make sure they're having a speech and language evaluation as part of this testing. And then the parent will have to consent to the evaluations, and then the district does the evaluations. The other way this meeting can go is that the district says, we don't think there's enough evidence to warrant evaluations. We think everything is fine. And we're not going to evaluate. So remember, parents, you're part of this team. So if the school team says to you, we're not going to test, but you feel like it's important to have the testing done, then you will ask the school team at that moment to note that you're not in agreement with that decision. As part of the team, you don't think that this decision to not test is appropriate. And you're going to ask for them to note that. And then, again, you kind of can regroup after that stage and kind of do next steps. But it's important to note that you're not in agreement with the school team's decision. And maybe after that meeting, or after that discussion, you have a better understanding and you are in agreement, and then that's okay. But if you really wanted the testing and feel like that your child needs that to understand, then you want to note that. Next slide. So it doesn't end, after that meeting. There's a couple things that you should still be following up. First of all, because you had a legal PPT, the school team is required to send you information and a formal documentation of what happened at that meeting. They have to include their recommendations, and they have to include, kind of where they were. This has to happen 5 days from the date of the meeting. Don't just not look at that document when it comes. It's really important to read it. If you don't understand what it says, you need to tell them, I don't know what this means. Can you explain this to me? If they note that everybody was in agreement with the decision, but you weren't, you need to go back and say, that's not accurate. I told you I wasn't in agreement, and I'm asking you to fix the document to reflect my disagreement. And remember, hopefully you have the recording and it's clear on the recording, and you can volunteer to send that if there's any confusion. When you receive the document, you have 5 days to email questions, to concerns, to document, any issues you may have. And the last thing is, if you agree to evaluations, you have to sign consent for the district to conduct the evaluation. They cannot proceed and test your child without your signature and your direct consent for that. So if you leave the meeting and everybody's in agreement and you're going to test, they cannot proceed until you've signed consent for that. And that's sort of my presentation on, the referral process and how to make it and how to go about it. I don't know, Christine, if there's any questions or.
I had a question. Can you mentioned regrouping, and, forgive me if this is something that you are going to cover in a subsequent lunch and learn, but you mentioned regrouping after your request for testing or for an evaluation is denied. What would you suggest that a parent do at that point?
So you have your procedural safeguards are in effect. So if the district refuses to test and you disagree, you can have a meeting with the head of SPED in your, the director of special education in your district. That's one option, to say, I'm really confused. I don't look at the data. I don't understand. Sometimes that'll work to kind of have another meeting and reconsider it. You can file a state complaint. on the fact that you think that this is a mistake and that you're asking the state to look at the data and to the remedy
evaluation.
the
Yep.
reason would be, it's a child find issue and you're asking for evaluations. You know, you don't have a right, because the district hasn't completed evaluations, you don't have a right to request or get an independent evaluation at that point. But your due process rights are in effect. So you can either file a state complaint, you can file for due process. Again, I would hope you could try to work it out, especially, if you're not an attorney, because it's really hard to file a state or to do due process in the state of Connecticut without legal representation. So that's, but every meeting they give you your procedural safeguards, and it does walk through kind of what your legal rights are.
Right.
So the best thing in that case is either to have the meeting with the head of SPED or to file a state complaint.
So really it would be to sort of kick it upstairs to, your district SPED supervisor, or go through the complaint process, which is an entirely, different,
whole new topic,
new topic, totally different webinar.
And the other thing, Christine, they may offer, like a lot of districts, and it depends on what you're worried about, but there is the SRBI system, which is a tiered level of system for support. So if the district says, we don't need a test, but we're going to put them in SRBI to see if a little bit of support will help, you can go down that route too. Two cautions on that. SRBI is designed to be, a quick fix, so no more than 16 weeks. So you want to, I would want it to be a very tight time frame. I would want to, as a parent, to know how much SRBI am I getting? What is it? Is it every day? Is it every other day? How frequently is my child being pulled out? And what's the time frame to come back to PPT with that data? So again, I would not be looking for a 3-month period where we're going to try this and then come back. I would be looking at a much shorter window. I'll give you this for 6 weeks or 8 weeks at the most, but then we're coming back to PPT with that new data to re-talk about it.
And does that include the different tiers of support?
It's 16 weeks total.
Okay.
So, and you don't have to have a meeting to move up and down through tiers, but you do, you don't want to be stuck. Like I talked to a lot of people who said my kid had SRBI all last year.
Yeah. Right.
Well, or at least all last year, and I'm starting this school year and I'm in SRBI again. At that point, that's not appropriate. And, I would be 100% arguing that we have enough data at that point that the SRBI system has failed, and this child needs, a much more intensive specialized instruction. Because that's not, if you go to the state website, it's very clear on the guidelines for how long we should be providing that intervention. And it's a quick fix. We don't want to over identify somebody that just needs a little bit of help for a little bit of time. But we should be not relying on SRBI to provide instruction for a child that needs a sustained amount of support.
And can you proceed with a referral while receiving SRBI? Absolutely.
Okay. And there is no provision in the law that says you have to go through SRBI before doing. So So again, if you think about it, like if I have a child that was early identified in the birth of 3 and I'm coming to the school district at 3 with that transition meeting, those children very rarely go through SRBI. They either have a sustained disability or they don't. And birth of 3 doesn't make the referral. But, so you don't have to go through SRBI. And certainly if you have an issue with I'm not getting a reading concept or I have a math, then SRBI is helpful. If it's more of a school avoidance or an anxiety thing, I don't really.
That's not going to be helpful. Yeah.
That's not going to be helpful. So I think we get stuck in a disability is only around a learning disability. Yeah. And there are 13 categories for disability, and only one is on learning disability. So that means there's 12 other ones for reasons why we need an IEP.
Great. I have a question from the audience. Do you have suggestions on how to best determine whether or not your child is at risk and what you should look for?
I mean, I think a parent, you can see. So like it's so hard, but like at risk, I mean, again, if I'm looking at testing and it's all going down,
Hmm.
I'm really concerned. So if I get, a thing that says at risk and now it's saying immediate help, which does happen in like the STAR or in the NWEA or some of those standardized testing, that's an indication on a learning ability. But I also think, are they happy? Are they
Getting off the bus and crying.
right,
On the bus and crying.
or telling you I hate school, like that can happen too. And why do they hate school? Like it might be that they're really smart and it's not academically, but it's something else. So it's hard to know, but I think and also discussing it with your pediatrician, like attention issues. There's if you can't focus and you're always moving, you're definitely not having the ability to take in that lesson. Especially in a classroom of 20 kids. It's hard.
What about some of the, you touched on some of when you were talking about gathering data before, would some of those also be ways to discern whether or not your child is at risk, like a lot of unfinished homework, the phone calls from school, that type of thing?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the school's only calling you at home if there's a big problem.
Right.
But absolutely, if you're having to sit down, if your kid comes home and forgets their homework half the time, or can't do the assignment that the teacher, homework is review. It should be, and
Of what was already learned during the day.
Right. So if you're having to sit down and one-to-one provide instruction to get through the 15 minutes, or maybe you're older, then there's a problem. I mean, if your kid doesn't know where to start and they're in 6th grade and they're not, they come home and they say they have no homework, but then they do, that's a problem. Missing assignments are a big problem. So, and I think a lot of that data can be found on the different websites that the school has. Like they will mark missing assignments, completed work, when it was turned in. So all that's relevant.
Yeah. And a lot of that now is easier, when you're logged into, your school, whatever system your school uses, whether it be Canva or, whatever, or Google Classroom, to keep track of what is, supposed to be done, on a daily basis, or whatever. I am looking at the group and it doesn't appear that we have any other questions. So thank you so much, Virginia, for a great presentation on this first half of the referral process. Please join us for our next Lunch and Learn series, and register. It's coming up in just a few weeks. And thank you all again for joining, and thank you, Virginia, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.